This isn't just a meme. It's not just internet noise. What you're watching is the collapse of meaning, the decay of stillness, and the erosion of your soul. They call it Italian brainrot. But underneath the colors, the chaos, the catchy nonsense, is something far more dangerous. A virus of the spirit. And you're already infected. Italian brainrot. A name that sounds silly, almost like a joke whispered in a chaotic corner of the internet. But what is it really? It began as a wave of bizarre, fast-paced videos featuring surreal characters with rhythmic nonsense names. Tralalero tralala, Bombardiro crocodillo, Ballerina cappuccina. Names repeated like spells in a language beyond reason. Sounds that stick, not because they mean something, but because they bypass meaning entirely. Italian brainrot is not a single video, not a song, not even a trend. It is a cultural manifestation. A mash of absurd visuals, sped-up rap lyrics, hyper-saturated colors, and faces that twist between joy and madness. It is hypnotic, addictive, and impossible to fully explain. It draws you in. You laugh, but you don't know why. You watch one video, then another, then another. Hours pass, and something in you feels off. The mind has been hijacked. Not by violence, not by fear, but by stimulation so extreme it leaves no room for reflection. To the casual viewer, it's just brainrot, a silly joke about wasting time online. But this is the surface. Below it lies a deeper phenomenon, a collective ritual of attention collapse, a symptom of a generation grasping for sensation in a world where meaning has been blurred to oblivion. Italian brainrot reflects our digital moment perfectly. Fast, loud, strange, and mesmerizing. It is the product of a culture so saturated with content that absurdity becomes the only thing left that feels real. The absurd is no longer the escape from normality. It is the new normal. And still, people love it. Why? Because it scratches an itch for chaos. An itch that we can no longer explain, but one that we feed over and over without asking where it leads. There is a reason why it feels impossible to look away. Brainrot content activates the same loops in the brain that respond to addictive stimuli. Novelty, unpredictability, reward. Each bizarre beat, each flashing image triggers a tiny surge of dopamine. Not enough to satisfy, just enough to keep you watching. But this isn't passive entertainment. It's mental conditioning. The brain, over time, begins to crave the speed, the absurdity, the nonsense. Stillness becomes unbearable. Silence becomes suspicious. And normal life, quiet moments, slow thoughts, deep reflection feels flat and distant. This is not entertainment anymore. It is consumption without digestion, stimulation without integration. Our inner world becomes a blur, just like the content we scroll past. Attention fragments, memory shortens, identity begins to scatter. Children watch these videos and become restless. Teenagers speak in broken sound bites. Adults feel numb. This is not a coincidence. It is the byproduct of an overstimulated culture. One that rewards the loudest frequency, not the deepest truth. But the greatest danger is not what brainrot shows us. It's what it silences. It silences the voice within. The quiet one, the wise one, the part of us that reflects, that questions, that awakens. The longer we live inside this chaos, the harder it becomes to remember that this is not the natural state of being. This is a trance, and most people never even realize they're under its spell. In the teachings of many spiritual traditions, the path to awakening begins with attention. What you give your mind to moment by moment shapes your consciousness, shapes your reality, shapes your soul. Now imagine what happens when the mind is flooded every hour with absurdity, distraction, and noise. Not just occasionally, but constantly. Imagine what it does to your ability to witness, to see truth, to hear silence. Italian brainrot is more than a meme. It is a mirror held up to the collective mind. And the reflection is not peaceful. It is frantic, fractured, and flooded with dissonance. The soul, once anchored in presence, is now drifting in a sea of meaninglessness. From a spiritual perspective, this is not entertainment. This is samsara wearing a clown mask. In Tibetan Buddhism, the intermediate state between death and rebirth, the bardo, is filled with dazzling visions, loud sounds, and fearful hallucinations. The texts warn us. If we do not recognize these illusions, we are swept away again and again into unconscious rebirth. What if we told you that brainrot is a kind of digital bardo? A cycle of endless sensation, pulling you away from your true nature. A simulation so loud it drowns out your subtle awareness. A world so artificial it teaches you to forget what's real. Spiritual teachings speak of clarity, of mindfulness, of stillness. But brainrot pulls us in the opposite direction, toward fragmentation, toward unconscious reaction, toward spiritual amnesia. This is not to say that humor, absurdity, or art have no place in awakening. On the contrary, they often reveal truth more deeply than logic can. But when absurdity becomes the default language of culture, when chaos becomes our only rhythm, the door to higher perception begins to close. And we begin to forget why we are here. There is also something darker, something few are willing to see. In spiritual psychology, we often speak of entities, not in a literal, external sense, but as energetic forces that feed off unconscious attention. Patterns that sustain themselves by stealing our presence. Addictive loops, toxic desires, hollow repetition. Brainrot, in its most extreme form, behaves like such an entity. It feeds on time, on energy, on your life force. Not by asking for it, no. By making you laugh and click and scroll until you no longer remember who you were before you began. In that forgetting, something sacred is lost. Not forever, but lost nonetheless. And so the question arises, what is the spiritual cost of our attention? What happens to a soul that forgets how to be still? That forgets how to breathe without input. That forgets what it feels like to sit in silence and actually feel the quiet truth inside. This is what brainrot threatens, not your intellect, not your morality, but your ability to return home, to rest in awareness, to see clearly again without distortion. And unless we remember, we will continue to dance, hypnotized on the edge of the abyss. There's something almost sacred about laughter. In the purest form, it is a release, a moment where the ego dissolves and joy floods in. But what happens when laughter becomes a defense, a reflex, a mask? Italian brainrot is funny. That's not a debate. But why is it funny? Why are we laughing so hard at something that feels like chaos? Something that, deep down, unsettles us. Laughter, in this case, is a nervous response. a way to soften the impact of absurdity, to pretend we're in on the joke, to hide the fact that we're overwhelmed. It's the laughter you hear at a surreal dream or in the middle of a mental spiral. It's the laughter of dissociation. Because what we're watching is not comedy. It's the unraveling of coherence. Each character, from Bombardiro Crocodillo to Tralalero Tralala, feels like a glitch in the simulation. A voice with no origin. A dance with no meaning. The kind of content that says everything and nothing at once. It's a joke, yes, but it's a joke that keeps going. Louder, faster, until the brain can no longer tell what's real. And still, we laugh. Not because it's healing us, but because if we didn't laugh, we'd have to feel how deeply uncomfortable it really is. There is something desperate in the way we cling to entertainment now. The constant stream, the demand to be fed more. It's not joy we're chasing, it's numbness. And brain rot is the perfect drug. Fast, loud, addictive, pointless. A hit of nonsense to avoid the noise in our own heads. But here's the danger. When we make everything a joke, we begin to forget how to feel reverence. We forget how to treat anything with sincerity. We start seeing life through a lens of irony so thick that even beauty becomes cringe. Even depth feels embarrassing, and sincerity becomes dangerous. We laugh to escape meaning, but in doing so, we escape ourselves. So we must ask, are we really enjoying this content, or are we drowning in it? Are we consuming it, or is it consuming us? Is this cultural evolution, or is it a cry for help disguised as a meme? When laughter is no longer grounded in truth, it becomes an anesthetic. And when we anesthetize ourselves long enough, we no longer recognize our own pain. And without pains, there is no healing. This is not a call to stop laughing. It's a call to wake up in the middle of the laugh and ask, what am I avoiding? Because beneath the humor, there is a silence. And that silence may be the doorway back to yourself. In a world that worships noise, silence becomes an act of rebellion. To step away from the endless stream of content, of flashing images, looping sounds, and algorithmic seduction is not easy. It can feel like disappearing, like losing relevance, like death. But in truth, it is the beginning of life. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of awareness. It is where the mind settles and the soul begins to speak. It is not empty, it is spacious. And in that space, something sacred happens. You begin to remember who you are. Not the version that reacts to trends, not the persona curated for likes or laughs, but the being beneath it all. The one who observes, who feels, who remembers what stillness feels like. This return to silence is not glamorous. It does not go viral, but it heals. It heals the parts of you fractured by too much stimulation. It soothes the nervous system, worn thin by content overload. It invites your breath to deepen, your thoughts to soften, your heart to open. And in that space, you begin to see through the illusion. You begin to notice how quickly your attention is stolen, how easily you are hooked by absurdity, how deeply your mind craves rest, but is trained to reject it. The truth is, most people fear silence because they don't know what it holds. But silence does not punish. It purifies. It brings to the surface what the noise was hiding. And yes, that can be uncomfortable. You may feel grief, restlessness, boredom, even panic. But if you stay, if you simply breathe, the chaos begins to settle. What remains is clarity. And from that clarity, you begin to make different choices. You reach for content that nourishes, not numbs. You listen more, react less. You laugh with depth, not detachment. And you no longer feel the pull to participate in the circus of constant stimulation. You become sovereign again. Not because you've rejected culture, but because you've reclaimed your consciousness. The return to silence is not an escape from the world. It is the way back into it with presence, with clarity, with wisdom. This is how we heal brain rot, not by erasing it, but by remembering that we can choose something else. And in that choice, we plant the seed of a new culture. One not built on chaos, but on consciousness. Every age leaves a footprint in the collective mind. Ours will be remembered by the speed of our scrolling, the absurdity of our humor, and the viral moments that passed through us quicker than we could reflect on them. But beneath the noise, a question hums. What kind of world are we creating with our attention? Culture is not a machine. It is a mirror. It reflects what we celebrate, what we ignore, what we amplify, and what we abandon. It is not built by algorithms, it is built by us. By the choices we make, moment to moment, about what we consume, what we share, what we laugh at, and what we create. If we give our attention to chaos, we feed chaos. If we choose numbness, we strengthen it. If we elevate nonsense, it becomes our language. But what if we chose differently? What if we used our creativity not just to mock, but to awaken? What if our content didn't just distract, but inspired? What if the next viral wave didn't make us laugh at our emptiness, but remember our depth? Imagine a culture that isn't afraid of silence. A culture where humor has heart. Where trend doesn't mean trance. Where creators are conscious and viewers are present. This is not a utopia. It's a choice. Every like, every view, every comment, every click, it shapes the field of human awareness. It trains the algorithms, yes. But more importantly, it trains our minds. It sculpts our desires. It sets the tone for the future. So we ask, are we just reacting to culture, or are we actively shaping it? Italian brain rot didn't appear out of nowhere. It is a symptom, a signal, a mirror of a generation that is both brilliant and burned out, hilarious and hollow, overflowing with creativity but starving for meaning. It is not something to be hated. It is something to be understood. And from that understanding, we can respond, not with cynicism, but with consciousness, not with shame, but with sovereignty. We do not need to cancel absurdity. We need to alchemize it. Turn the chaos into clarity, the laugh into insight, the meme into a message. The future of culture is not in the hands of the few. It is in the hearts of the many. And if you're listening to this, if any part of you feels the call, you are one of those hearts. So take the next moment, not to scroll, but to breathe, to feel your awareness settle. And from that space, ask yourself, what kind of culture will I choose to create? Because whether we laugh or awaken, numb or evolve, it is always a choice. And your attention is your vote.